The tow truck was already backing into my driveway when I got home, and Denise Halloran was standing next to it with a clipboard like she owned the place. "You can't park heavy machinery on residential property, Mr. Reyes. Says right here in Section 4. That's my work trailer, Denise. It's been sitting there for 6 years. Not anymore." She didn't even look up from the clipboard. I stood in my own driveway in Tulsa, Oklahoma, watching a stranger hook a chain to the flatbed trailer I used for hauling equipment on remodeling jobs, the same trailer that had put my daughter through 3 years of dance lessons. My 8-year-old Mia was watching from the porch with her backpack still on, lunchbox dangling from one hand, asking me why the truck was taking Daddy's trailer. I didn't have an answer for her yet. But I had a feeling this wasn't really about a parking rule. 3 weeks earlier, the Ridgemont Homeowners Association had started storing something on the back half-acre of my property, the strip along the drainage easement that technically sat inside my fence line but that the HOA's paperwork claimed as shared maintenance access. I hadn't thought much of it when the first shipping container showed up. Then a second. Then, over 11 days, 12 more, until 14 full-size steel containers sat stacked too high behind my house like a shipping yard, all of them property of Ridgemont HOA's landscaping and community improvement contractor. Nobody asked me. Nobody called. I found a laminated notice zip-tied to my fence post that said the HOA had temporary staging rights under an easement clause I'd never signed. I'd let it go for a while. I had a business to run and a kid to raise alone since her mother moved to Phoenix 2 years back, and I didn't have the time or the money to fight a homeowners association over a strip of grass nobody used. That was my first mistake, the same mistake I'd make 3 more times before this was over. Denise Halloran wasn't just a board member. She ran the property management company the HOA contracted for storage logistics, which I wouldn't understand the significance of for another 6 weeks. Right now she was just the woman standing in my driveway, watching a stranger hitch up my trailer over a rule that, as it turned out, didn't actually exist in any bylaw the HOA had ever properly adopted. "You have paperwork for this?" I asked. She finally looked up. "The board doesn't need to explain itself to every homeowner, Mr. Reyes." I watched the trailer roll down my street, and I looked back at my daughter on the porch, still waiting for an answer I didn't have. What I didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that 14 shipping containers sitting on private property for over 60 days, without a lease, without rent, without my signature on anything, created a legal problem for the HOA that Denise Halloran had never bothered to consider. Mia's mother left for Phoenix with a boyfriend from her nursing program 2 years ago, and to her credit, she never fought me on custody. She just stopped showing up, then stopped calling, then sent a signed release through a lawyer instead of picking up the phone herself. I didn't have time to grieve that properly. I had a 7-year-old asking why Mommy's number didn't work anymore, and a remodeling business that didn't pause for anybody's heartbreak. Ridgemont wasn't home when I bought it. It was affordable, quiet, and had a decent school district, and I figured a homeowners association meant somebody was keeping the lawns even and the noise down. For the first year, that was mostly true. Denise Halloran became board president 18 months ago, and the personality of the whole neighborhood shifted with her. Notices got more frequent. Fines got more creative. A neighbor 2 streets over got cited for a mailbox that was structurally non-conforming. Another got fined for a trampoline that had been there before Denise's family even moved in. I got my first notice about unauthorized commercial vehicle storage for keeping my work truck in my own driveway, a truck with my business name on the door, the same business that let me make Mia's dance recitals and coach her rec league soccer team on Saturdays. I paid the fine. $90 felt cheaper than a fight. Then came the drainage easement conversation. A contractor named Wallace Pruitt, who did landscaping work for half the HOA board members personally, needed somewhere to stage equipment during a neighborhood-wide irrigation project. Denise brought it up at a board meeting I wasn't at, because homeowners aren't required to attend, and somehow that became authorization to use my property. I found out about the containers from Mia, actually. She came in from the backyard one Saturday and said, "Daddy, there's boxes as big as our house back there." I walked out expecting a delivery mix-up. Instead, I found the first container already parked 8 feet inside my fence line, chained shut, with a Ridgemont Property Solutions sticker on the side. I called Denise. She told me it was temporary and administrative, and that I'd received proper notice, which I hadn't. I called the property management office. They redirected me to Denise. I asked a neighbor, Tom Aldrich, who'd lived there 11 years, if this was normal. They did something similar to the Whitfields 2 years back, he told me, lowering his voice like the fence had ears. Parked equipment on their side lot for a whole summer. Whitfields just let it go. Moved out the next year. That should have been my warning. Instead, I let it go too, for exactly as long as it took for 14 containers to become impossible to ignore, and for my daughter to start asking questions I couldn't answer with, "It's complicated, sweetheart." After the trailer got towed, I stopped being patient. I drove to the county records office on my lunch break and pulled the plat map for my property. The drainage easement Denise kept citing did exist, but it was 4 feet wide, meant for a utility line, not a staging yard for 14 shipping containers. Nothing in it authorized storage, equipment, or third-party contractor access. I made copies. I took photos of every container, every padlock, every Ridgemont Property Solutions sticker, every day the ground got more torn up from delivery trucks. Then I wrote Denise a formal letter. Certified mail. I gave the HOA 30 days to remove the containers and restore my property, and referenced the actual boundaries under the actual easement. Her response came 4 days later, not by letter but by a new HOA violation notice taped to my door: unpermitted excavation and landscaping alteration, $650 fine, for the photos I'd apparently taken while standing on shared maintenance access. I called an attorney that same afternoon. Her name was Priya Chandrasekharan, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. They don't own that strip, Mr. Reyes. If those containers have been there over 60 days without a signed lease or your consent, and if the HOA can't produce a validly adopted bylaw authorizing this, you may have a legitimate claim, but it takes time. And they know most homeowners won't fight. How much time? Weeks. Maybe longer if they stall. That was the moment Mia stopped playing in the backyard. She told me one of the containers had made a scraping noise at night and it scared her, so she just stayed inside instead. I didn't push her to go back out there. I moved her bike to the front porch and told her we'd figure something else out for now, and I hated that I had to say it. 2 weeks later, Wallace Pruitt's crew started running a generator behind my fence at 6 in the morning, 3 days a week, for the irrigation project. No notice. No apology. When I confronted him directly, he just shrugged. Denise cleared it. Take it up with the board. I went to the next HOA board meeting myself, first one I'd ever attended, expecting a conversation. Instead, Denise opened by reading a community update listing 3 new fines against my address, including one for obstructing contractor access to designated equipment storage for the bike I'd moved to my porch. A woman 2 rows back, older, sharp-eyed, caught my attention afterward in the parking lot. Her name was Carol Whitfield. "You're the Reyes house, right? Behind the containers." "That's me. We went through something almost exactly like this 2 years ago. Different contractor, same board. We didn't fight it. We should have." I asked her why they hadn't. She looked back at the clubhouse before answering. "Because Denise doesn't lose. Not against people who play fair." I went home that night, sat down with Priya's letterhead in front of me, and decided I wasn't going to play fair anymore. I was going to play by the actual law. Priya's strategy was simpler than I expected, and stranger than anything Denise saw coming. If the HOA placed commercial property on your land without a valid lease, for over 60 days, without your consent, Priya explained, Oklahoma law lets you treat it as unauthorized storage on private property. You can file for a possessory lien. Essentially, you can charge them storage rent, retroactively, for every day those containers sat there. If they don't pay, and they can't produce a valid authorization, a court can award you the contents as compensation. They'll just move the containers the second they get served. Probably. That's fine. The rent obligation exists whether the containers are there tomorrow or not. We filed in small claims first, then moved to civil court when the amount crossed the small claims cap. 61 days at a commercial storage rate for 14 40-foot containers on private land came out just over $38,000. Denise's lawyer, a young guy from the property management company's retainer firm, tried to argue the drainage easement covered it. Priya had the actual plat map, the actual recorded easement language, and photos time-stamped from day one. The HOA board scrambled. Wallace Pruitt's crew pulled the containers out within a week of being served, all except 2, which had mechanical issues with the mover's lift equipment. In their rush, Nobody at Ridgemont Property Solutions did a proper inventory before storage began, and nobody could produce one now. Denise's own emails, subpoenaed during discovery, showed her telling the board 6 weeks earlier, "Reyes won't fight it, he never has before." That line came up in court. Priya read it out loud. The reveal that actually mattered wasn't the containers, though. It was what was inside 2 of them. Manifests showed irrigation equipment, pumps, control panels, specialty piping, that Ridgemont Property Solutions had billed to the HOA's Community Improvement Fund at nearly double their retail cost, invoices approved by Denise's own signature as board president. Wallace Pruitt was her husband's cousin. Nobody on the board had known that when they approved the contract. The judge wasn't interested in HOA politics. He was interested in unpaid storage debt, an invalid easement claim, and a board that had never produced written authorization for anything. He ruled the HOA owed the $38,000 in storage rent. When the HOA couldn't pay it as a lump sum without a special assessment vote they didn't have time to hold, the judge awarded me legal possession of the contents of the 2 remaining containers as partial satisfaction of the debt, equipment worth close to $22,000 at fair market value. Denise sat perfectly still when the ruling came down. For the first time since this started, she didn't have a clipboard in her hands. Mia asked me that night if the backyard was ours again. I told her yes. She wanted to know if the boxes were really never coming back. Never coming back, I said, and for once, I actually believed it. The ruling didn't stay quiet in Ridgemont for long. Court records are public, and it only took one curious homeowner pulling the case file to realize the HOA had just been ordered to pay $38,000 for storing contractor equipment on private property without authorization. Money that would have to come from somewhere, since the HOA's reserve account wasn't anywhere close to covering it. The board called an emergency meeting. I didn't go, but Carol Whitfield did, and she called me afterward. "It got ugly fast," she said. 2 board members resigned on the spot when the invoice numbers came out, the markup on that irrigation equipment, Denise approving her husband's cousin's company without competitive bids. People have been asking questions about assessments for 2 years and just never had a reason to look this closely. The special assessment vote to cover the judgment failed. Homeowners weren't willing to pay out of pocket for a mess they didn't create. That meant the HOA had to liquidate reserve funds meant for pool maintenance and a repaving project that had been promised for 3 years running. Ridgemont Property Solutions lost its contract within a month, not because of a criminal case, but because no board wanted its fingerprints anywhere near Wallace Pruitt's invoices anymore. Denise didn't get removed by a court. She didn't need to be. At the next scheduled board election, she lost her seat by a wide margin, the first contested election Ridgemont had seen in 6 years. I heard she and her husband put their house on the market not long after. I don't know where they moved. I didn't ask. The equipment from the 2 containers, pumps, control panels, coiled piping, sat in my garage for about 3 weeks before I sold most of it to a landscaping supply outfit 2 towns over, at a fair price. Receipts documented the way Priya told me to keep them. It covered her fees with a little left over, which went straight into Mia's college account. Nobody went to prison. Nobody got publicly humiliated beyond what their own emails already did to them. That's not how this kind of thing usually ends, and Priya had told me that from the start. What actually happened was smaller and, in its own way, more permanent. A board that had run the neighborhood by intimidation for 2 years lost its grip because one homeowner finally made them prove their authority existed on paper. Tom Aldrich stopped me in the driveway a few weeks later. "Whitfields wish they'd done what you did," he said. "So do about 6 other people on this street." I told him it wasn't bravery. It was just running out of patience at the exact moment I had enough evidence to matter. It's been 8 months since the last container left my backyard. The grass back there is still patchy where the ground got compacted, but Mia and I planted a small vegetable garden along the fence line this spring. Nothing fancy, just tomatoes and peppers in raised beds we built together on a Saturday. She checks on them every day after school now, lunchbox dropped on the counter, sneakers already off, straight out the back door like the yard never stopped being hers. The HOA is unrecognizable from what it was. The new board passed a rule, ironically enough, that any use of a homeowner's property by a contractor requires written, signed consent from that homeowner. No exceptions, no administrative workarounds. Tom Aldrich is on the board now. He asked me to consider running next term. I told him I'd think about it, mostly because Mia asked me the same thing and seemed to like the idea of her dad being, in charge of the boxes people aren't allowed to leave places. I still run my remodeling business. The trailer they towed came back to me eventually, released without a fight once Priya's letter made clear what continuing to hold it would cost them on top of everything else. It sits in the same spot it always did, and nobody's put a notice on it since. Denise Halloran and I haven't spoken since the courthouse. I heard through Carol that she and her husband relocated somewhere near Dallas, and that Wallace Pruitt's landscaping company folded within the year once word got around about the invoices. I don't know if she'd ever admit she was wrong. Some people don't need to hear an apology from someone like that to move forward. I didn't wait for one. What I think about most isn't the court date or the $38,000 or even the 2 containers full of irrigation equipment sitting in my garage for 3 weeks like the strangest inheritance imaginable. It's the night Mia asked me if the boxes were really never coming back, and the fact that I could finally answer her honestly. Being a single dad meant I spent 2 years letting things go because I didn't have the bandwidth to fight every battle. A fine here, a notice there, an easement claim I didn't have time to research properly. I told myself I was protecting my daughter by keeping the peace. What I actually learned is that peace built on someone else ignoring your rights isn't peace at all. It's just borrowed time. Mia's out in the garden right now as I think back on all this, checking on a tomato plant that's about 2 weeks from producing anything worth eating, completely unbothered by the fact that her backyard used to look like a shipping yard. To her, it's just home again. That's really all I wanted back. Not a settlement, not a courtroom win, just the yard and the quiet, and the right to tell my daughter something and have it be true. Tell me what you would have done in my position.